Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about population issues as they are presented in the entertainment media and how norms are changing and the relationship of population issues to global sustainability with my guest, Bill Ryerson. He is founder and president emeritus of Population Media Center. He has served as executive vice president with Population Communications International, has been deputy director with Planned Parenthood Northern New England, Director of Development, Planned Parenthood Southeastern Pennsylvania, and Director of the Youth and Student Division Population Institute. He has received many awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award with the nonprofit Pro. He's received the Nafis Sadiq Prize for Courage from the Rotarian Action Group on Population and Development. He had a traineeship in biology with NASA. His memberships are many. He serves as a board member with Flow Ready, also an advisor with No Violence at Home, and is an advisory board member with the Earl Babby Research Center, Chapman University, and is chair of the Population Institute, as well as being a member of the Advisory Council of Population Matters and a member of the board for Music for the Earth. He has written many books and articles, so many we can't mention them all, but all of them are very important, including his entertainment media plays an important role in fostering social change toward the impact of social change communication, and many others about population and why it is such an important topic to discuss. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Nancy, thanks for having me on. It's a great pleasure.
I was mentioning just a few of your many articles and books. You wrote one time 16 myths about population growth, but let's begin with why population growth is of concern.
It's interesting that in this day and age of intentional disinformation, we're hearing people wringing their hands out loud about population decline, when in fact population globally is rising by about 80 million a year and has been for decades. While the rate's gone down, the numbers have stayed the same because so many people having babies. So we're still seeing rapid growth. When you think about it on a daily basis, it's about 225,000 people added per day. So while some people think it doesn't matter, the UN Environment Program 3 years ago identified in a very thorough report on the causes of extinction that the greatest threats to biodiversity are, number one, expanding human farming, and number two, expanding human habitation. And when you see farmlands being paved over for suburbs in the U.S. or anywhere, you realize, yes, indeed, there is a huge loss of habitat for other species. And while maybe losing the last Indonesian rhino isn't all that important in terms of survivability of the planet, it is the web of life, the biodiversity that has evolved over 3 billion years that makes the planet habitable. So loss of biodiversity is a threat to sustainability that is not talked about in the era of people who believe the only issue is climate change. But certainly loss of wilderness spaces, the rainforests that are the lungs of the world, like the Amazon and like rainforests in Africa, that are being replaced by soybean fields, is a huge loss of the ability to absorb carbon dioxide that those original wilderness areas provided. So the ecosystem servicing of wilderness areas is part of why our planet and climate has stayed so stable for most of human existence. And now we're in a spiraling wave of growth in carbon dioxide and therefore growth in heat-related incidents on the planet. And it is a major threat. And of course, population population paving over wilderness areas is part of that. It's also the case that some scientists have looked in depth at what slowing population growth could mean for the climate issue. Brian O'Neill, University of Colorado Boulder, did a in-depth analysis of what could be done by promoting child spacing, smaller family norms, and elevation of women's status in terms of reduction of carbon emissions. And he said this alone could provide somewhere about a quarter of what is necessary to avoid catastrophic climate change. So it's not 100%, but it's not zero either. And it really deserves to be addressed by climate meetings that are being held where this is hardly ever discussed. When I got interested in this issue, I also realized that, in fact, reducing fertility rate has been one of the key elements in increasing people's economic welfare. What's referred to as the demographic dividend by demographers is that when many of the countries of Asia initially reduced family size through adoption of family planning and delayed marriage and other tactics, what happened was no change in family income immediately, but people were suddenly not spending all of their income on food, housing, and clothing for children because the number of children had gone from 6 to 2. And as a result, that allowed for savings. That created a capital marketplace. That allowed businesses to borrow and expand. That led to a demand for more employees. That drove up wages and created a middle class. And that created taxable incomes that governments could use to build infrastructure like schools, roads, and electrical supplies and other municipal services. And all of those steps increased economic productivity, so that roughly 20 years after fertility rates dropped in many of what were called the Asian tigers, their economies took off, and suddenly people were living better. And we're seeing that now in many countries. Certainly Latin America has realized the same kind of demographic dividend, and some countries in Africa are beginning to. But high fertility rates are still associated with extreme poverty. So helping people to achieve better health, better economic welfare, and at the same time protecting the planet from catastrophic environmental changes like climate change and loss of biodiversity is a win-win-win situation.
You have brought up so many critical issues and explained that they are so interrelated. The loss of ecosystems, wildlife extinction, 5 to 10 species a day becoming extinct, and yet we depend on those ecosystems for clean air, clean water. You talk about the rainforest being critical, but also the boreal forest, and every forest needs to be protected. You talked about fertility and how if women have a right to choose how many children they want and limit the number of children they have, those children can be healthier and get an education and have a better life. These issues are so related. Carrying capacity on this planet, according to many scientists, say that we only need about 2 billion people on the planet and everybody can have a great lifestyle, but yet we have over 10 billion people on the planet and the number is still growing.
Actually, a correction. We have 8.3 billion, but we expect to have 10 billion by the middle of the century if we keep on going the way we are.
I recall in my biology class reading a book called The Population Bomb by Dr. Paul Ehrlich. It pointed out how population is so related to the health of our environment, and the health of our environment is important to how we survive. I'm wondering if we need another kind of book like that to educate the people about what's going on. Is the entertainment industry tackling the subject, or are they afraid to talk about population?
Some are not, but certainly population has become controversial for a number of reasons, and certainly mistakes have been made. People don't always do everything perfectly. But you mentioned the population bomb. That's what got me interested in this subject. I was a graduate student at Yale at the time that it came out, and we had a series of lectures in the biology department where I was about environmental threats to the planet. And so my advisor, Charles Remington, invited Paul Ehrlich, who just authored that book and was another biologist, to come give a talk. And I attended the talk. I had dinner with him at Remington's house that night, and that weekend, the two of them and an attorney from Connecticut founded Zero Population Growth. And then I started the 4th chapter in the country. So I've been at this since the late 60s, and I found that looking back all these years, a lot of what he said was true. There were some things that were wrong, and indeed the errors that he made are things that have been pointed out by those who wanted to make the issue controversial. controversial, but Ehrlich himself, the most recent time I spoke with him, said he's now more pessimistic about the future of the planet and its sustainability than he was when he wrote the book.
Another important article that was written back in the 60s was by Dr. Garrett Hardin, The Tragedy of the Commons.
Yes.
It points out basically the commons were a public grazing area in Boston. Public could graze their sheep there, but at some point, if everybody grazed too many sheep, there wasn't going to be any pasture for them to graze. In other words, what is the limit?
And when you think about it, the air we're breathing is part of the commons he referred to in that article, and the water we're drinking is part of the commons. So, in fact, resource shortages that are increasing in frequency are one of the primary drivers of wars around the planet. The relevance of what he wrote back in, I think that was in the late 60s, is still with us. It's often complex for non-scientists to put all the dots together.
I know that in the late 80s, when I did my second Emmy-nominated documentary on overpopulation in the United States, it was very difficult to present the problem of too many people in the United States because everybody wants to have a good lifestyle, have all the consumer goods that we are used to. It's a lot easier to show overpopulation in developing countries where people are starving and having difficult times. You don't see that as much in the United States. But yet, isn't consumerism part of the problem?
Indeed it is. I mean, population wouldn't matter if we were ethereal beings and consume nothing. So the issue really is the number of people times their average consumption and emission rates. One of the things that might have helped your film had you waited until 2009 was a study of carbon legacy by two Oregon State University scientists who calculated the carbon legacy of individuals in the United States. And because each baby born to a U.S. couple has much higher consumption than, say, a baby born to somebody in West Africa, the total impact on the environment in terms of emissions of carbon dioxide is tremendous. So what they said, and this is a quote, each child adds about 9,441 metric tons of carbon dioxide to the carbon legacy, and that's making assumptions over a few generations, of an average female, which is 5.7 times her lifetime emissions. So what that really says is if a U.S. couple decides to have one fewer child, they're making a contribution to the planet more than 5 times greater than their lifetime emissions. And so that means even if they have adopted electric vehicles, solar panels on their house, and all the other steps with efficient energy use, like efficient light bulbs and so on, one less child is a contribution to the health of the planet 5.7 times greater than that.
You've written about 16 myths about population growth. There's probably many more myths about population growth. What are some of those myths?
Well, certainly one is the belief that population growth is necessary for economic growth. That's what's driving a lot of the concern with declining fertility rates in European countries, Japan, and the U.S. But in fact, that is a myth. The countries that are best economically in terms of economic welfare are the ones with the slowest growth or declining numbers. So it's not true on a per capita basis that incomes go down. The gross national product may, but the income of individuals is what's really important in terms of economic welfare, and it's not true that that declines when population declines.
Another myth is the idea that it's not a population issue, it's food and resource distribution. Why is that not correct?
It's certainly the case that at one point we could easily feed all the people on the planet. The amount of food wasted would have made up a huge amount of the need for people who are starving. But in fact, the economy of various countries is impacted, as I mentioned earlier, by high fertility rate. And so the only way you could have used the food we had to feed the poor was to give it to them. And for a while we did that, and it suppressed against agriculture in those countries. So, in fact, what is much better as an approach to addressing people is to help them escape from poverty so they can afford to feed their children nutritious food. Indeed, now, food per capita is in rapid decline as population continues to grow, and we have basically run out of places where we can add farms. Every time we add a farm in place of part of the Amazon forest, we are causing faster climate change. So it is critically important that we address both issues simultaneously.
Aren't so many wars over the centuries, and including now, due to too many people needing resources, food, land, water?
Absolutely. Fights over resources are becoming more and more intense. While religious differences are one of the big causes of wars, resource shortages are number one, and they're driving a lot of conflicts around the planet. There's good documentation that the highest tendencies towards these conflicts occur in countries that are undergoing rapid population growth.
If people could understand the impact of population, perhaps we might protect our environment better. And I know that you have worked for decades in this arena and can inform us about what has happened, what is happening, what we need to have happen. And we'll talk more about these issues when we return in a moment with my guest, Bill Ryerson, who is founder and president emeritus of Population Media Center.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Bill Ryerson, who is founder and president emeritus of Population Media Center. You have been involved with so many different organizations. Why did you start this particular group?
The Population Media Center is the outgrowth of really a career in this field. Obviously, family planning is important, and I spent some time, as you mentioned, with 2 Planned Parenthood affiliates because I really wanted to understand how family planning worked. But even while I was doing work in the field of family planning, that I came to recognize from the demographic and health surveys that the top reasons for non-use of family planning by couples who don't wish to have another pregnancy had to do with misinformation about safety and effectiveness and cultural traditions that made it very difficult for women to determine the spacing of their children. And on top of that, over half of the people who are not using modern methods of contraception are doing so because they want bigger families. And that's particularly true in West Africa, where desired fertility is higher than actual fertility. So to use the most extreme example, the country of Niger has an average number of children per woman or per couple of 6 children. And yet when women are asked how many children they want, they say 10 and their husbands say 13. So they're not even having the number they want. So availability of family planning is irrelevant to them. If they had more income, they would have bigger families based on the tradition of large family sizes being necessary to have 2 children live to adulthood. But in fact, now and since World War II, as public health measures came into place and vaccination programs came into place, infant and child mortality has dropped severely to the point that over 90% in any country live to adulthood. So in fact, population growth is primarily post-World War II at its rate because of a huge public health success story, public health and public health measures and vaccination programs that have dramatically reduced infant and child mortality. But the traditions in some countries remain that tell people they must have large families. So either people who are trying to live up to societal role models of huge families and honoring women who have very high fertility, or people who have heard that contraception is dangerous and have no idea that having a child every year starting at age 15 is multiple times more dangerous than using any form of contraception. perception. Helping people understand the reality, both for their health and for their economic welfare, is critically important. So I founded Population Media Center to really give people that information. Because, as you know, as a documentary maker, it's hard to get people to sit still and watch a documentary. Some documentaries will just have talking heads telling people the problem with no solution offered. I found Inconvenient Truth educational, but really depressing in that coming away from that film, you didn't know what you could do to help solve the problem. Obviously now there's a lot people have learned about how to address climate change, but people are not making decisions about how many children they're going to have based on global demographic trends. So what I decided we needed on the planet was an organization that would do more accessible mass media, i.e. entertainment, which is what people go home at night to do. They don't go home at night to listen to public health messages. So creating entertainment programs that would draw lots of people, and then creating role models out of some characters who evolve over the course of 150 or 200 episodes into role models for the audience. And the beauty about this strategy is it's never telling anybody what to do. People don't want to be lectured to. It is showing consequences of decisions by characters that the audience is learning about while enjoying the show. And they often decide that they want to model their behavior after some character in an entertainment show because they saw that person realize benefits.
You have also been involved with Planned Parenthood, and yet government funding to that organization is being discontinued. Is it possible that people can recognize that they do more than just abortions?
Abortion is less than 1% of what they do. So it is really destroying an organization that is the primary source of health for many women in the country in order to make an ideological point. But it's certainly very much opposed by most people. That is cutting off their funding because so many rely on Planned Parenthood for all kinds of health services.
You have also been involved with Population Institute with their youth and student division. Are the young people recognizing that population is a problem and is connected to climate change, which most seem to be concerned about?
Interestingly, yes. Population Connection carried out a survey recently and found the majority of young people are very concerned about population issues. So while one has the impression that there's controversy around it, most young people are clear-eyed in seeing this is an issue and we need to see something done about it.
You are an advisory board member for various research centers at universities. Are they willing to teach about population in their biology classes, anthropology classes, social science classes, history classes?
This is something that depends on the faculty member, but certainly I've given numerous lectures at the Yale University interdisciplinary course on population that was offered by Robert Wyman, who's a biologist. Earl Babby, whose institute I'm advisor of, is one of the country's leading sociologists, and he does an annual textbook, Sociological Research Methodologies, and in that book he cites some of the research Population Media Center has done to measure impartially the effects of our programs. And he's actually been involved as an advisor to help us ensure that researchers in any country who are evaluating the impact of the program are using scientifically designed sampling methods as well to make sure that we have a rigorous study of effects.
You have certainly been extremely successful in both educating people about the problem as well as providing solutions to the problem. And if they want to find out more about what your organization is doing and some of these resources that you have available, you have a very easy website, www.populationmedia.org, just the way it sounds, populationmedia.org.
I'll mention just a couple of examples of the impact we've had with these shows. We've done shows in now 58 countries, and in some countries have reached over half the population where there are government broadcasters and very little competition, which is the case in much of Africa, which has the highest fertility rates. So in Ethiopia, when we did our first show there, 26% of new reproductive health clients cited the show as the reason they had come to the clinic. clinic. In northern Nigeria, 67% of new family planning adopters at 11 clinics that asked what motivated the decision named our show as the primary factor. And in Sierra Leone, 50% of new family planning adopters named the show as the factor. We've measured changes in attitudes about family size, attitudes about consuming wildlife as food, and numerous other issues, including attitudes about reforestation and actually purchasing of tree seedlings to help reforestation through such programs. So we can address multiple issues in one program and realize effects in all of those areas.
I'm so pleased to hear about these successful programs because people do get motivated when they see what's presented and take action. I think sometimes we need a new population bomb to explore the many myths about population growth, explore the impact of population on the environment. I'm an anthropologist. I've studied cultures around the world. You mentioned cultural attitudes, but it's also religious attitudes that seem to say we have to have lots of people, lots of children.
And it's the attitudes also of some very well-heeled business leaders who think since they have a semi-monopoly in some area, the more consumers they'll have, the richer they'll be. But in fact, high population growth in very poor countries doesn't lead to consumption, it leads to starvation.
Too many people does pose the problem of having many more people in a state of poverty.
Yes.
I also have been very involved in environmental work to protect ecosystems, wildlife. You mentioned very early on how we're destroying even agricultural fields and putting in housing. Where is our food going to come from? We need the wildlife. We need that circle of life, and we are destroying the homes of other species. Do you think that people will make this connection to saving wildlands, saving ecosystems, saving wildlife, and their population activities?
You have raised, I think, the critical question, can we do anything about this issue? And indeed, what we are seeing is people who are paying attention, including people who are listening to your shows, are taking steps. And some people are choosing non-parenthood because of hearing programs like this, while others are going along in ignorance about what causes economic welfare, what causes poor health, etc., and who are not paying attention. So the most critical need is to get people better informed. We have in the U.S. a lot of people who are really unaware, and because of loud bullhorns saying we need more people by people who think they'll just make more money if there are more people buying land or buying their buildings or buying their product, a lot of people are thinking, oh, the problem must have been solved, but indeed it's still there, and it's still as big a threat to our long-term welfare as a species as anything.
I was very disappointed when the United Nations had a population conference many years ago, and the United States refused to sign on to that international agreement. Do you think that as a nation we might wake up and join other nations in trying to tackle this problem?
It depends on who is in charge of the government. At the time of the 1994 Cairo conference, the delegation was led by Al Gore, and indeed that one, which was the most recent one, I attended the first one in 1974 and the last one in 1994. We did sign that program of action. So that has remained even though there's not been a population conference by the UN since then. And indeed, if there were one now, I think we would see many conservative governments pushing for retrenchment of the recognition of the need for women to have access to information and services to achieve reproductive health.
I'm wondering if we can have political correctness and still talk about the population problem.
We can. Certainly, there are lots of examples of population being addressed in a human rights context. There are those who say, oh, if you're concerned about population, you must be, and then you can add any number of things, racist, you must be misinformed, whatever. There are very sound ecologists, very sound human rights advocates who say population is not only an issue, it's very important for the welfare of people to address this issue, because right now it is driving us towards an unlivable planet.
In addition to your organization, you know how important it is to work with other organizations. So you serve on advisory councils, you are chair of Population Institute, a member of the advisory board for Population Matters, member of the board of Music for the Earth. Will the entertainers, the singers, the writers present more music to talk about this problem and to give us the solutions?
Some will. Certainly there are creatives who have come to combine their talents with addressing in their lyrics or in their programming issues that relate to population. And it doesn't have to be about population. It doesn't have to be about numbers. It has to be about the rights of people to have full information, the rights of people to have access to family planning, the health benefits of spacing children at least 3 years apart. If people are given free choice and not told what to do, but learn about this through entertainment media and entertainment practitioners, it can be very, very effective. The other thing that we see entertainers doing is doing benefit events to help organizations like Population Media Center raise funds. So it's certainly the case that there are people in the entertainment industry who get it and who are concerned and want to help.
And there's certainly people like you who are helping, who are trying to do what you can to bring awareness to this most critical problem. I'd like to thank you so very much for your good work over these many, many decades. Thank you for being my guest.
Nancy, thank you for having me on. It was a great pleasure.
You're welcome. I have been speaking with Bill Ryerson, who is founder and president emeritus of the Population Media Center. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.